Hi, this is John Roll for the Roll Report. Today is Wednesday, July 30th, 2025, and this is my first video update of the day. I would like to discuss today the 10-day ultimatum that President Trump gave to President Vladimir Putin. But before I start, I'd like to welcome everyone to my channel and hope you find these videos informative. Getting right into the material, I would like to discuss first point number one, is that President Trump, we understood him as a peace president, at least that's why he was elected. But if we go back to November 2024, when he chose Kellogg as the envoy to both Russia and Ukraine, this was basically an indication that he was not interested in resolving this conflict because Keith Kellogg would never be able to find common ground, in part because he doesn't care about validating or accepting the position of Russia and then trying to find a midpoint with Ukraine. He was only interested in freezing the conflict, and then we know after that then they would rearm Ukraine military, they would recruit more soldiers or mobilize them one way or the other, and then they would go and attack again. So freezing the conflict is not the same as finding a lasting peace. And so the selection of Keith Kellogg of envoy was the first indication that President Trump was never interested in peace. He was only interested in war. But now it's become very obvious his full ownership of this conflict. He's taking this baton from President Biden, but he took it on day one of his presidency when he refused to select someone who could validate both sides and then find a common point. So that's point number one. Point number two is Russia's demands were never given any validation during this process. They were completely ignored and told that their concerns were of null value. So we can go back to the Minsk agreements when ex-Chancellor Angela Merkel and ex-French President François Hollande met with President Putin, and they came to an agreement, only to find out later in the memoirs of Angela Merkel and in an interview of François Hollande that the Minsk agreement was only to buy time for Ukraine to get arms, to get training, and to get their militaries ready to attack Russia. So it's very obvious since the Minsk agreements that Russia was not dealing with honest brokers who wanted to find a position that would ensure the security interests of Russia. So that's point number two, that Russia's demands were never validated, and that means that negotiations can never take place. The third point is that the Russians will never stop. They will keep going until now it looks like they will be heading towards Zaporizhia. After that, we have Odessa. And once they get through Zaporizhia, it's not far away to get to Odessa. And from Odessa, they can cross over to Transnistria. And once they get to Transnistria, they will cut off the access of Ukraine to the Black Sea, and that will be the end of Ukraine's economy, because then they'll have to send all their products through Poland or try to move that through Romania to the Black Sea. So that would be a big blow. And so the Russians will not stop. This is point number three. Point number four is President Trump was displaying a lot of urgency, but the urgency really is on the Ukrainian military deteriorating situation. They're running out of troops, they're running out of funds, and maybe running out of support as well among even the most ardent supporters. So there seems to be an urgency, and is it because they fear an imminent collapse of the Ukrainian martial law government? So that's point number four. Point number five, and the last point, is what will happen once this 10-day period ends on August 9th. August 8th, August 9th, we'll see what President Trump says. Of course, this period could end before. President Trump could reduce it from 10 to 5, and he could also increase the period from 10 days to 20 days. he could do all kinds of things. He could go from 10 days to 20 days and then down to 15, and then he could move it to 30, and he could do all kinds of weird stuff. But the important thing is that once this period runs out and President Trump is forced to take the next step, what will he do? Because he's planning on secondary sanctions on China and India for purchasing Russian oil and gas. And that will mean that we'll get back into the situation of putting on 100% or 150% or 500% tariff on China and India. And those countries will stop doing business with the United States. And then we'll have to ask ourselves whether that gets us in a better position or worse position. But we do know that for the automobile industry, in order for them to create the magnets that they need for production, that they need the rare earths that China is selling. And if they go hardball with China, China will cut off those rare earths, and this will shut down the U.S. auto industry. And so that will be bad for the U.S. There could be other consequences as well. So in summary, for today's video, I would like to say this 10-day ultimatum what President Trump gave was a really silly thing to do, as well as the 50-day ultimatum they had previously given. Russians don't take ultimatums seriously, and just using threats doesn't really mean anything for the Russians. They have very clear what their goals are. They've already communicated them. They will continue to seek to achieve them as long as it takes. So if Trump wants to avoid the continuation of this war, he needs to change his strategy. But now he's fixed himself kind of in a groove that will take him in a direction leading towards war. Some say we're already in World War III. It's hard to say, but we're certainly getting very close. And for a president who was elected to be a peace president, this is a shame, but it should not be a surprise. So thank you for joining me today for this video. I wish everyone a wonderful day and hope you can come back soon. Bye-bye.